Welcome back to Modern Tactical Shooting. Now, 2025 is proving not to be a very good year for SIG. It seems like every other month there's new allegations of the Sig P320 going off on its own in the holster, and an Army captain has just released a scathing review of the M7 rifle, which is currently still in trials with the Army to replace the M4. Now, I want to talk about both those subjects in the video, and I know with regards to the Sig P320 and the allegations of it going off on its own in the holster, I'm really, as a YouTuber, I'm late to the party. There's tons of videos on that, but really spurred me on to want to talk about this is after watching the video made by the guys over at GBRS group. After watching that, I decided, hey, I'm also a YouTuber who covers military stuff and firearms stuff, and as a former special operations member, I think it's time I weigh in on this subject and give you my point of view with the issues surrounding the Sig P320. So let's get into that right now. Now let's start with the Sig P320. I have nothing against the guys over at GBRS Group. In fact, I think they're masters of marketing. They have a very popular channel. Business-wise, they are on it. But after watching their video where they basically put out a rebuttal against all the claims of the gun going off by itself, I don't think it was the best look for SIG. Maybe it's just me, but dropping the F-bomb 6 different times at your viewers and basically making a blanket statement that all the accidental or negligent discharges are the result of the user. I think that was probably not the best look, and from what I'm hearing, they are sponsored by SIG, so really they can't give an unbiased opinion. When you're sponsored by a company or representing the company, basically anything you put out is going to be marketing. Unless you go totally negative against that product, really anything you say, you can kind of count that in marketing itself. So just looking at the comments on their video they put out, it's not viewed in a very positive light. And I don't think, again, it's helping SIG's case at all with regards to the issues surrounding the Sig P320. Now, researching this subject, I came across a CBS report from about 6 months ago where they actually do a pretty good deep dive into the allegations surrounding the Sig P320, and mainly from the law enforcement perspective, all the issues law enforcement is having. I'm going to put a link to it down in the description, but it's pretty thorough. And they trace issues going all the way back to 2016, and their current count as of 6 months ago was 80 reported incidents of the gun going off by itself or the gun going off in the holster. So that's pretty significant. And of course, there's been a few more reported incidents since then. So we're probably somewhere around 90 reports of this gun going off. Now, I do agree with the guys over at GBRS Group. I'm sure when we really look at it, some are probably unintentional user interface, meaning, yes, somebody had their finger on the trigger when they were either drawing the pistol or reholstering. I've seen it. I've seen it happen in the military, people ADing from the draw or reholstering. And in my classes that I teach, I've had it happen one time. A guy was on the range, we're getting on it hot and heavy, and he holstered too quickly and he did fire one off into the ground. So yes, it can happen. And I'm sure there's a percentage of these 80 incidences where, yes, maybe some are user error. But there's just too many reports of things like this happening with the pistol. There's a lot of video evidence going around. Now, not the video evidence that the guys at the GBRS Group wanted, which is a hands-up video of a gun going off in the holster, but in that CBS News broadcast, now the video is quite grainy, but in that video, one of the officers talking about how he bent over into his police car, and then when he came back up, that gun went off in his holster. And you can kind of see it in the video. His hand is nowhere near the holster. The gun goes off and then he puts his hand on the holster. So to me, that's pretty clear that these guns are having some sort of issue going off in the holster. Now, a majority of the reports of the gun going off have to do with law enforcement, but it's not limited to law enforcement. A quick Google search, I found one report going back to February of 2023. A Marine, his M18 went off in the holster, and they had 2 eyewitnesses saying the gun was not handled or touched. and the Marines have already ruled on it apparently that it was some sort of failure with the pistol. And then back in 2020, a Canadian Special Forces member had a pistol go off in his holster and he was injured by it. So it's not just limited to the law enforcement side. Now, of course, there are a ton of videos out there with everybody offering up their hypothesis on why the Sig is going off. One of them being maybe it has to do with the metal injected molded parts that come in the Sig P320, and I guess a few other Sig Pistols. Not all those parts apparently are made in the US. Some are outsourced to other countries. And some people saying, well, maybe it's just poor quality control with these components. Maybe they're not spec'd right. They're slightly out of spec, or they haven't been hardened or treated properly, and this is leading to failures in the pistol. Now, I'm going to offer my own reason, my own speculation on why I think the 320 is having issues with it going off by itself. And this goes back to that CBS report. In the CBS report, they stated that they talked to Sig, and Sig admitted that pistol can go off with some vibration. They didn't say how much vibration, but it is possible it can go off. Now, why does it seem like most of the reports of the Sig going off have to do with law enforcement? Well, if we look at it, most of your patrolmen, they're spending hundreds of hours a month in cars, riding around patrolling, and they're getting in and cars and out of cars all day long. Their guns are loaded. They're probably not being taken to the range a lot, so their guns are staying loaded a majority of the time. And driving around, you have little micro vibrations while you're driving, getting in and up out of your seat. That's more vibrations. So maybe these little micro vibrations are adding up over time, and whatever part is slipping in the gun to make it fire, maybe that's leading to it fire. Again, this is just my speculation. I'm just guessing, just based on what Sig has said can happen with the gun, and just looking at, why does it seem to be a systemic issue with law enforcement? Well, they're doing a lot of driving around, a lot of micro vibrations while they're driving, and again, getting in and out of the car. Maybe that has something to do with it. Again, I'm just spitballing here, but I think that's maybe a path that needs to be explored or looked at. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. Well, Jeff, in all your videos, you're always shooting a Glock, so you're probably a Glock fanboy and just want to bash the Sig. Well, it's true. I am a Glock fanboy, but I'm not paid by Glock. I'm not sponsored by Glock. All the Glocks I have, I own myself. I purchased them. And to Sig's credit, some of their other pistols are actually really good. In fact, I'm a huge fan of the Sig X5 Legion. It's a phenomenal, out-of-the-box, ready-to-go pistol built for competition. Sig really did their homework with that gun. My son that shoots matches with me, he owns one, and that gun absolutely flies out in matches. In fact, it is better than all my different Glocks, even my modified ones. They really did their homework with that pistol. Super flat shooting, points great, has great balance, has a pretty good trigger right out of the box. They really did their homework. And at the time that he bought it, he got it for just under $1,000. And for what it is, that's actually a really good price. Again, if you're just looking for a no-nonsense, competition-ready pistol, I don't think you can go wrong with the Sig X5 Legion. I would definitely recommend it to people if they want a competition-ready pistol and just be able to get ready and get on it. And speaking of their rifles, I own a classic Sig 5.56 rifle. Of course, these aren't made anymore now. They're collectible, and they command a premium on the used market. But I think if Sig wanted to create some excitement and maybe a distraction from all the issues they're having with their pistol, I think if they brought this back and updated it with a lightweight M-LOK handguard and maybe added the ability to change out the pistol grip, I think this would do very well if they offered it again. But really, what U.S. firearm owners want is the Sig 5.51. I think that if they brought that into the States, I think that rifle would do really well. People seem to be nostalgic about the older firearms now, and they do very well. Hence, some of these used guns do very well in the market. And I think that would do pretty great if they could release that. Now, speaking of rifles, let's talk about that report of the M7 rifle. Now, of course, I did a video on my thoughts of the M7 about 2 years ago. And if you look at the report by, let's see, Captain Braden Trent, if you compare his recent write-up and criticism of the M7 to what I was saying 2 years ago, basically the comments are the same. He first brings up the weight of the rifle. I have it calculated, and I think most mainstream people have it calculated with that Vortex optic, having it just over 13 pounds suppressed with a magazine with that optic. He, in his report, has it just over 15 pounds. I don't know where he's getting that weight from. Maybe it's rigged up differently. Either way, 13 or 15 pounds, that's both ludicrous for a combat rifle. Of course, if we go back to Vietnam, the M14 is 11 pounds loaded. The Army deemed that too big and heavy for the average soldier and for the terrain and the situation in Vietnam. It's just too big and heavy. And here we are now with a 13-pound rifle. And with regards to that 6.8 round, it's pretty interesting. He does point out that they're seeing a lot of barrel wear, both in the rifling and I guess outside the barrel, around the 2,000 round mark with that 6.8, which of course is cranking out at, I believe it's 80,000 PSI. So the pressure's way up there to give it its armor piercing capability. Now, I don't know if all the barrel wear is with your training round, which might be under a less PSI, or if they're out there shooting up the actual duty ammo armor piercing rounds. All right, real quick, I want to mention this book right here, which is To Die with Such Men by Shannon Monaghan. Now, this book focuses on the stories of a few different Americans that join the International Legion and go off to fight in Ukraine. It takes place, or I would say, a little early on in the war. I was sent this book just to read. I'm not paid to bring it up or anything like that. The author sent it to me and said, hey, if you found this book interesting, I'd like your opinion on it. And I just finished reading it, and I gotta say it's a very interesting read. It reads very matter-of-factly, but it does confirm some hypotheses I've had as to what's going on with people who do join the International Legion and do go over there and fight basically as mercenaries, and kind of what full-blown peer-to-peer conflict looks like. I will say this right now, artillery is proving to be yet again the king of battle. So a very interesting read, very technical read too. Even though the author never served in the military, she's very technically proficient when she's talking about the different weapon systems from the Bren and Bren 2 that they're carrying, and things like some of the javelins and different weapon systems they're using. You would think that she actually served in the military. She hasn't. So very tech-savvy book. A very interesting read, goes into urban fighting and things like that. Honestly, I'd like to see a part 2. I'd like to see what's going on the current stage of the war, really the last 8 months in Ukraine. You see all that heavy trench fighting, and I'd like to see something about that. So maybe we'll see a follow-up sometime. But yes, very interesting book. You can find it on Amazon if you just search the title, To Die with Such Men, or look up the author's name, Shannon Monaghan. Again, very interesting read, and there's instance surrounding how the fighting's going that I actually want to bring up when talking about the M7, and I'll talk about that right now. Now, of course, the M7 rifle is not being used in Ukraine, but one thing that struck me in reading this book, when the members of the International Legion, the American members, get one of their very first engagements, they're given very specific guidance on how to employ their rifles in a way that really I never had to think about during all my tours in GWAT. And I don't care what anybody says, the M7 rifle is heavily influenced by our experience in Afghanistan. The average soldier was engaged at from over 500 yards away. The enemy used terrain and distance as their friend in Afghanistan. Just about every American soldier can talk about how they were shot at by PKMs from 500, 600, 700 yards away. And I know the Army wanted a rifle with overmatch capability to match the ranges we were shot at in Afghanistan. Now, big criticism in my video that I made on the M7, everybody was like, hey Jeff, the 6.8 is, yes, it has a 600 yard or 600 meter capability, but it's really the armor piercing effectiveness that's what that round and rifle brings to the table. Sure, armor piercing is a cool capability, but I'm still convinced Afghanistan influenced heavily in the requirements for that next rifle. And if you look at the peer-to-peer combat going on in Ukraine, there's a lot of capabilities with the M7 that one, aren't needed, and two, actually might hurt the user depending on the tactics and how combat is playing out in Ukraine. And that's what I found interesting in this book. The Americans are told in one engagement, hey, don't shoot at the Russians till they get within 150 yards. If you do it any earlier, 500, 600, 700 yards out, they're not going to approach. They're just going to call in artillery. And then that will, of course, result in casualties. Wait till they're within 150 yards to, one, maximize their effective rifle fire, getting good aim shots, and two, bring them in close enough so it negates the ability for the Russians to use artillery against them. So if you look at the M7, let's say the American Army deploys to Ukraine, that rifle has a capability of 600 meters with that great Vortex scope. Well, it's a capability that's not going to be needed because they're fighting at such close distances to negate each other's forces' capability to use artillery against each other. So if you are out there trying to pick off targets at 600 or 700 yards, well, you're just going to draw in enemy artillery. And I don't care what you say about the 6.8 armor-piercing round. Rifle fire does not trump artillery fire. And a majority of the casualties are coming from artillery and, of course, drones. So with that M7 rifle, it has a capability that may not even prove to be a factor in the future fight. And as far as armor piercing capability, and I actually plan on doing a separate video just on what I think the future rifle or the next rifle should look like. In terms of armor piercing capability, if you look at what's going on in Ukraine, they're rocking 5.56, 5.45, and 7.62 by 39, and you don't hear about body armor being an issue. I know the Russians are mostly out of good body armor, but there's still some good body armor out there, but you don't hear that being a major factor in their engagements. And I'll cover this in that video I want to do on what the future rifle needs to look like. But the Soviets have had a round that can defeat Russian body armor since the late 2000s. And it's in a very small package. They have a 5.45 round that will defeat Soviet armor. So I think it's big army's obsession with bigger bullet, meaning bigger result, that drove them to the 6.8. We can get an armor-piercing round in a lot smaller package, less recoil, maybe tone down the pressures a bit. Now, one more thing that Captain Trent brought up also was issue with the cocking handle. I guess there's problems. It has dual cock. It has a side charging handle, and I guess a conventional AR-style charging handle on that platform. And there's issues with soldiers having to pull it back all the way to cock it and things like that. But yeah, I truly believe, as I said in my very first video about the M7, I don't foresee it being issued as a weapon to all frontline forces. I don't think it's going to make the cut. If you look at the Army's own original timeline, the Army is about a year behind where it should be in the procurement and issuing process with the M7 rifle. And I don't see it happening. I see it really, in the end, it's going to be a designated marksmanship rifle. I think we're going to see 1 or 2 guys per squad at the most issued this gun, and everybody else is going to be rolling with 5.56 M4s or URGIs, something in that format. I still don't think the M7 is going to make it, especially if more reports like this come out from active duty members who have hands-on experience with the rifle. Now, another piece of news unrelated to SIG, Task and Purpose wrote an article back in March where the Army is looking to trim down the fighting weight of the combat soldier to about 55 pounds. It just so happens I've been working on a video on practical fighting weights. Actually, was supposed to be my next video, but I made this one instead. And also address certain pieces of equipment like the current Army rucksack, which, spoiler, I think it's a dismal piece of kit, but that is going to be my next video. What do practical combat weights look like? I think it's a very interesting subject, especially after all my time serving in the military and a few deployments under my belt. I have some, I would say, some very personal views on the matter. But with regards to the Sig pistol and the M7, I'd love to know what your thoughts are with regards to the Sig P320. Was I widely off in my speculation of what's causing it with the vibration? Do you think it's something else? By all means, put it down in the comments. Or where do you think the M7 rifle is going? Was it a good idea by the Army? Am I off in my thoughts on it? I'd love to hear what you think. But as always, hopefully you found this video entertaining and informative. And I'm Jeff Gerwich. Thanks for watching.